Almost there. Okay, I think we're good.
Oh,
What's going on, everybody? Andy Abramson, just jumping on. Happy Wednesday. Man, just crazy that we're in the midst of December and we're heading towards 2024. Taking a few minutes with my friend Patrick McGinty from Central, and wanted him to jump on today. Patrick and I have had the chance to be together for, I don't know, like the last year and a half or so, just kind of working through ministry. So I wanted to kind of get him on. He's a great leader to just give some insights and perspective for those of you who are ministry leaders along the way. So Patrick, how you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing great. We just wrapped up here at Texas A&M finals yesterday, so our college students are headed home for the break, and it's hard to believe that we're already at Christmas. It's
I
been an
know.
incredible semester, and excited to spend some time with you this morning. So thanks for
Yeah.
having me on.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So, Patrick, why don't you share a little bit, just like how you got into college ministry, how you got into your position right now at Central, and just even some of the things that maybe God has taught you over the last semester or two.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The Lord has been so kind to me. It's been a wild ride, and feel like the luckiest guy in the world to get to do college ministry in College Station, home of Texas A&M University. So I went to school here at Texas A&M, drank the maroon Kool-Aid, and when I was in college, I was saved at a young age, but sports really were the center of my life growing up. And in college, I fell in love with the local church and started getting discipled and plugged into just the life and rhythms of a healthy local church. And I think it was through that experience that I realized college is just this unique season of life where you can invest in students and the Lord might change their entire trajectory. And that was certainly the case with me. I would have laughed when I came to Texas A&M if you would have told me that I'd be doing full-time ministry. I wanted to go be a doctor and was on that path. And the Lord just worked in some really clear ways and shifted my trajectory towards ministry. But I was particularly interested in doing business and ministry. So I had gone to seminary. I was working, leading student ministry in an unpaid role at a church plant while working in the corporate world. Love that, but just woke up and realized I don't want to go to this corporate job. I'd much rather just invest in people and do ministry. And if I was thinking about where I wanted to do ministry, College Station, Texas, working with college students at Texas A&M seemed like the dream. And about that time, the college pastor role at Central Church opened up, and started praying about what it would look like to serve in this capacity. The senior pastor here is a longtime friend of mine, so I was very encouraged about the direction the church was moving in. We're a legacy church coming up on nearly 100 years old that's got a history of investing in college students. And so I was excited to be at a church that had the resources and history of an established 100-year-old congregation, but also a heartbeat to be a church where every generation reaches the next generation. So I went through that interview process and started back in January of 2022. So coming up on 2 years here at Central, just have absolutely loved it. My wife and I, we've got 4 kids, 14, 12, 10, and 8. And we have college students in our home all the time. And in terms of one of the things I've learned is just how valuable time around the coffee table can be with college students, time around the supper table, inviting them in to your home, doing life together with 4 kids at the age and stage of ours. Like, life is chaotic and crazy and hectic. So we don't often have times to do this real formal sit down with college students, but we invite them to go to the grocery store with us, or go help coach a basketball practice with us, and then hang out for supper afterwards. And it's just been a gift to get to do life together with these students. But I think at the end of the day, we're getting to minister to a generation of students who are hungry, but at the same time are grappling with some really challenging things about what's my purpose, what am I supposed to do, what is the point of all this. And so it's just been fun to get to walk with students and serve them. So sorry, long-winded answer there, but that's
No,
a
you're
little bit
good.
of my background and how I ended up here at Central.
Yeah, I remember the first time that we met was Roundup, a conference
Yep.
2022. right? And I was doing a pre-conference session on starting a college ministry, which Patrick wasn't technically starting at that point, but you were restarting. That's kind of
Yeah.
what probably drew you to that. And at the end of this, I offered to do a whiteboard session with somebody, like just in front of everybody, like just kind of map out their ministry, talk through. And I'm like, hey, does anybody want to do that? And Patrick's hand just like, before I even like finish a sentence, I remember your hand like just shot up and you're like, I'll do it. So that was kind of our first introduction to each other. And
Yeah,
then,
I'll take the free consulting anytime.
yeah,
I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything, and want to learn from someone like you. And really, that session was what led me into pursuing Elementum and jumping in at the level of investment that we have. I saw tremendous value just in that one little session, and since then, my just appreciation for you and your ministry has only grown. Getting to see how hard you work to equip leaders like us.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So here we're going to jump into our topic today, right?
Yeah,
So
let's do it.
talk about, like one of the things that really you're passionate about is this idea of first evangelism, but then ongoing discipleship. And I've
Yeah.
seen that evident in the way that you structure your programming, even meeting some of your co-leaders when they came to Austin a few months ago. Like that was pretty evident of like just a passion. So why don't you talk to me first about like maybe how that became a passion for you, and then maybe like how you began to integrate evangelism and ongoing discipleship into the life of your ministry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to answer your question of where the passion came from, it was just an understanding, a realization of the reality of what's at stake. There's this Charles Spurgeon quote that I love that is a little intense, but I think it communicates a sense of urgency and was big in terms of helping me process and think about these things. So I'll just share it. It's, if sinners be damned, at least let them leap to hell over our dead bodies. And if they perish, let them perish with their arms wrapped about our knees, or with our arms wrapped about their knees, imploring them to stay. And if hell must be filled, let it be filled with the teeth of our exertions, and let no one go unwarned and unprayed for. And that quote by Spurgeon, I think, just highlights a sense of urgency that we've got to have, and understanding that, like, man, eternity is on the line, and there's a lost and dying world out there who need to know about Jesus and the freedom and hope that is found in him and the gospel. And so reminding myself of that urgency, and then trying to cast vision for our students of like, yes, it's important to pursue the things that you're doing as a college student. Like, I love that you're passionate about grades or your extracurricular involvement or your job, but at the end of the day, like, we're called to make disciples. And so I think it starts with trying to cultivate that sense of urgency. And really, I believe as a leader, it starts with your own heart. So every single day, I've got a list. I've got multiple 3x5 note cards that are filled with names of lost people, and I'm praying for them every single day. And it's one of my highlights of my day. It was actually really special. Last week, I got a text as I was heading to bed from a friend of mine sharing the story of one of the names on that list coming to faith in Christ. And I just started crying because I've been praying for it for a year. And it might be a day. One time there was a name on there literally for a day. And there's several of them that I've been praying for multiple years. But I think creating that sense of urgency, something that we've done with our students is challenging them at 10:02 every day to set an alarm on their phone, coming out of Luke chapter 10, verse 2, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few, and to pray for laborers, for pastors and missionaries and church planters, but at the same time at 10:02 to pray for the lost. We have 70,000 students here in Bryan College Station, many of them coming from hard to reach countries, Iran, China, those places, India, those places that can be harder to reach, sending students right to our doorsteps. And then, having conversations with our students in our discipleship settings. Hey, how did you engage the lost this week? Because it's so easy, especially in College Station, there's this Christian bubble, to go through the motion and never end up actually engaging the the lost. So trying to cultivate this sense of urgency, but then we also want to provide training and opportunities for our students on, hey, here's how you can engage the lost. It can be a scary thing to go and share your faith with someone. And I think it's scary for seminary students. So especially like your freshmen who might be newer to the faith, like how can we train them and equip them? And so what we've found is doing a once a semester, typically at the beginning of the semester, training on personal evangelism can be super helpful. And at that training, yes, walking through some of the techniques, you're probably familiar with the 3 circles, is one that a lot of our students like. Romans Road is another one that we have some students like. But really, I think the value of that is, forcing them, hey, you've got a minute to share the gospel with someone. And then we do it like 20 times, just almost a speed dating of sharing the gospel and just getting them comfortable. So we do that training, but then we have weekly opportunities where we're out on campus at Texas A&M, and we're just doing outreach to the students and trying to engage them. And oftentimes we'll invite a student who might be newer in their faith or newer to sharing their faith to come and get partnered up with a more experienced student and give them the freedom. Hey, you don't even need to say anything. Like if you're not comfortable with that this first time, just pray as the conversation is ongoing, but trying to create spaces for students to actually put that into practice. Then multiple times a year, we've got mission opportunities for short-term mission trips. That's something that we pray that every single one of our students would go on a short-term mission trip while they're with us in the life of our ministry. And in the lead up to those, we just have additional training. So trying to create that sense of urgency, but also structure things in a way that gives them exposure to training and opportunities to share their faith. So we've got that formal training at the beginning of the semester. We've got weekly opportunities, and we've got opportunities a couple times a year through our short-term mission trips. And through that, we've been able to see a lot of fruit, even when it might not be people coming to faith. The thing that's encouraging to me as a college pastor is when I hear a student say, hey, that's the first time I've ever shared my faith. And the act of going out and doing that has actually forced me to think about the gospel, and it's helped me grow my love for Jesus. And now I want to go and do that again. And so stories like that have just been super encouraging. And one of the ways we've tried to just create a culture of evangelism. And I think part of that leads into the next piece on discipleship, because when there's a culture of evangelism and you see lost students get saved, like that's not the end state. That's not the end of the game. That's really just the beginning to then actually go and teach them to observe all that Jesus has commanded us and to make disciples. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking about not just the evangelism piece, but the discipleship piece as well. I'm happy to dive into that. Or if you have any questions on the evangelism front, I'm happy to answer them. I'll give you an opportunity to chime in.
I don't necessarily a question, but here's what I love, and I just kind of want to highlight is I think sometimes that people approach evangelism kind of accidentally in the ministry. And one of the things I love about you, and I hope that as leaders are listening to this and really beginning to evaluate their ministry, is hearing from you the strategic intentionality of providing those spaces, but also equipping those students to do it well and to experience some of those spaces. And so that's one of the things I love about, like, I feel like that if I could somehow communicate that piece right there to other college ministry, young adult ministry leaders of like, how do you help create an intentional strategy around times on campus, short-term missions trips, training, equipping, even the questions we ask, right? Because you talked about that. It's also like, as in those discipleship relationships, that's a part of the conversation that you're having with those people of saying, hey, who are you sharing your faith with? Who are those people that you're really engaging in that way?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that last thing there, one of the things we really try to emphasize with our students is this idea of gospel relationships. So lost people that you are pursuing relationship with, like over time, for the sake of sharing the gospel. So not just, hey, I'm going to the coffee shop and sharing the gospel with the first person I see. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're
Yeah.
trying to cultivate these gospel relationships where you're engaging the lost for months. And one of the ways we do that is by creating events that are tailored towards
Mm.
lost people. Hey, come do this trivia night. We're going to feed you. We're going to play some trivia. We will pick you up if you need a ride. For a lot of our international students, they need a ride. But trying to engage the lost. Or Christmas event. Hey, we're going to have a gingerbread house decorating party and
Mm.
contest and watch movie and drink hot chocolate. Bring your lost friends, and
Mm.
trying to create spaces where those lost people feel that you love them, that you care about them, that they're not just a project.
Yeah.
And then challenging all of our students to participate in those types of relationships.
So
Like if
good.
you're a Christian and you don't have a friend who's a lost person, you're doing something wrong. And we try and say that and communicate it in a loving way. But if you are not engaging the lost and you're plugged into all of our different programming, you're going to start to feel uncomfortable, because it's something we talk about a lot, not to make someone feel guilty, but to create that sense of urgency that is necessary in light of the reality of what's at stake.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things I really appreciate what you said, and like that it starts with you as a leader, right? Because I
Yep.
think a lot of times, even in college, especially for people who've been in kind of the church world long enough, where in some ways they become detached from people who need Jesus, right? And
Mm.
so they spend time in office and they spend time with leaders and they spend time. But one of the things I just really love about what you said is like that it starts with you, right? It starts
Yeah.
with you praying for people. It starts with you sharing your faith. It starts with you engaging lost people, being missional. Like, how would you encourage maybe a leader who has maybe gotten stuck into the rut of maybe not doing that very well? What are some maybe just practical ways that they can begin to take those steps?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And in terms of practical ways, I would just challenge you to force yourself to think about it. So, for instance, that those note cards of lost people, that is sitting on my desk on top of my Bible. I see that every day. There's no way for me to ignore that. My alarm at 10:02, it goes off every single day. It forces me to engage. When I'm meeting with students and I'm asking them, how have you engaged the lost this week? I tell them, ask me that same question.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then in terms of like practical things, it's super easy. My wife and I, we invite, we've got three law students. One's Muslim, one's atheist, one's Hindu. And we try and have them over to our house because they're not interested in coming to church yet, for a
Yeah.
meal on a regular basis. And it doesn't need to be every week. I mean, I'd love for it to be. The reality of our schedule, it's not every week, but once a month. Like having those students in our home, and I just personally try to engage the lost every single day in some way, even if it's just texting one of those people off the note
Mm.
card, um, and praying. Like, even if you're not going to see them, if you've got meetings all day, you're going to be with other believers, we can at least pray for the lost. And
Yeah.
so would just encourage you to pray, put reminders in front of yourself where you're not going to be able to ignore it. I know we get so busy oftentimes that, like, it's not out of a malicious intent. You might just be so occupied with other kingdom work that you miss this. And then finding some sort of rhythms to have that lost student in your home. And the way that we try and do that is invite some of our leaders over with them. So then
Mm.
our leaders get to see us having the lost in our home.
So good.
They get to build relationships with these students. And it's turned out to be one of our favorite times of the month where we get to engage those people.
So good. So good. One of the things, and this is where I want to transition with you, is like, and you started to kind of go down this road before we kind of jumped into some conversation around evangelism. But the reality that once somebody comes to faith, that our job's not done, right? Now that we shared the gospel with them, now that they've put their trust in Christ and have made that step, then there's a process of continuing to walk alongside of them. Why don't you just kind of jump into maybe some things that you do in terms of ongoing discipleship?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge. The Great Commission, yes, we're to go and make disciples of all nations, but then we're also to teach them to observe all that He's commanded us. And I think it's important we don't forget that part of things. And one of the things that we try to emphasize, if you are plugged into our ministry, if you're part of our ministry, we want you in one-on-one discipleship. And we've got a program here at our church. So as I mentioned, we're a nearly 100-year-old church, which is awesome because we've got a intergenerational demographic. We've got men and women who have lived life, who have walked faithfully with Jesus, who are a couple of steps ahead of these college students who love college students. Not everyone is that way, but we've got a lot of them. So we try and find those adults and meet with them, cast vision for, hey, here's what it looks like to disciple a college student. Would you pray about it? And then we take our college students and try and be intentional and pair them with someone that they're going to build a solid relationship with. And ideally, they're meeting once a week. They've got some structure where they're walking through some intentional questions. Depending on the student, it might be going through a book of the Bible. It might be going through a book on some topics, say prayer, for example. But oftentimes these students are just hungry to have someone to meet with, to do life with, to pray with, to learn from. And then we encourage some life on life discipleship outside of that intentional weekly meeting. Hey, have them over to your house for dinner. Go to an Aggie basketball game with one another. Like, have fun together. And we try to promote this regularly within the rhythms of our college ministry. Our senior pastor will promote it amongst our key leaders. So it's something that we want to put in front of our people and something that we track. Like, it's one of the metrics we track, not for the sake of numbers, but to see how effective we are at plugging students into discipleship relationships. If you're coming to one of our groups, we'd love to see you connected in that one-on-one discipleship environment as well. So we have that, which is a major part of how we do discipleship. But we also have small group discipleship. So groups of, say, 3 to 7 students who are connected again with a leader who loves college students. And one of the things I love about the small group discipleship is they're often friends. So you and your 3 roommates, Andy, might be hungry for discipleship, and say one of you was in the same fraternity that I was in, and so I'm going to go and disciple you guys. We're going to do small group discipleship, 6:30 a.m. Tuesday mornings, whatever it might be. But doing small group discipleship just allows for some of that accountability with the students throughout the week. Foster some deeper community, which has been really cool. And again, those are structured where you'll walk through some questions, you'll open God's word together, you'll pray with one another, you'll do life outside of those discipleship meetings as well. And these are typically our leaders that we're helping to foster this type of community for. But then we also try to encourage and empower our student leaders to pursue discipleship relationships with other students. Like a 18-year-old freshman is going to be drawn to a 20-year-old junior. And that junior who came to faith when he was a freshman, he's probably going to be able to disciple that 18-year-old more effectively than I am, just because he's right there and is close with them. Now, these are college students. They're going to feel like they're not prepared, like they're inadequate. That's fine. We can walk with them, give them training and strategies on here's how you can pursue this discipleship and to do it faithfully. And we're here for you if you've got questions, if you are struggling with what sort of content you could use, if you find yourself in a situation that you don't understand. But we want to empower those students as well. So to summarize, we think it's really important, and we try to cast that vision for a discipleship is part of the process. Like, someone becoming a Christian, it is just the starting line. We want to plug them into one-on-one discipleship. We've got men and women in our church who are investing in our students, praying for our students. We find small group discipleship opportunities, and then we really empower them. Like, hey, if you're a junior or senior, like, go find a freshman, Go find a sophomore that you can pour into, that you can disciple. I just right now, earlier this morning, wrapped up a breakfast with a student who was discipled by a senior who's part of our ministry last year and through the start of this year. And now this student is wanting to dive in here at Central, wants to serve on our leadership team. I was really hungry after he'd been bouncing around at different churches, but one of our students had this vision for discipleship poured into him. And now we've got a high capacity leader that's planning to come on board. So it doesn't always work out that cleanly, that easily, but certainly something that, again, I think we've just got to prioritize and create avenues and pathways for our students to hop into.
Yeah. One of the things I'd love for you to kind of just talk about, because it's easy to kind of chart things on paper,
Yeah.
but when we're dealing with relationships, it's never as clean as we want it to be, right? So what are maybe for somebody who's listening who like, man, we need to really begin to emphasize and create a strategy for ongoing discipleship. Just speak to some of the challenges that you faced and just the encouragement to kind of push through some of those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Look, we know that ministry is challenging, is difficult, and oftentimes it's because of people, right? Which is what makes ministry great. But at the same time, we are sinners engaging other sinners in a fallen world. It's going to be hard. I think some of the biggest frustrations we've had, this isn't surprising, with college students is, hey, we get this adult who's fired up, who's praying, who's prepared, who shows up to meet with the student, and the student just sleeps in and doesn't text them and no-showed them because they were meeting at 7 a.m. and he was up till 2 a.m. playing Fortnite. Like that is frustrating. I think it's also frustrating when you have people meeting with students who might be struggling with a particular issue, and they say, hey, I want to stop using drugs. And then there's an ongoing battle with this. And it can get discouraging at times of like, man, we're dealing with the same issues, the same challenges. You say you want to change, but your actions are revealing something else. It might be, hey, we found an adult that we thought would be great with a college student, but did not, for whatever reason, engage that college student well, was maybe talking down to them. And we've had that happen before. Completely hogging the conversation, not engaging the student at all, but more lecturing the student. Someone was just awkward and didn't know how to engage a college student. And so there's challenges and frustrations on both sides of the coin, both sides of the map. And my encouragement, if you find yourself in those phases, is to keep pressing on. Put one foot in front of another, pray for that student, pray for that mentor who's discipling the student, and really be okay starting slow. Like it doesn't need to be this massive built out process at first. Like for us, we're now 3 semesters into this, so it's a little more built out. We started with a small group of trusted men and women that I knew I didn't have to train at all, and they were going to crush it because of who they are, how they're engaged. And so it's like, hey, let's learn from that. Something we do every semester is send out a survey and try and gather feedback from both the adult and the college student to help us understand what we could be doing better. And then we try to incorporate that into the training we do the next go round. So there's going to be challenges. There's going to be struggles. Keep pressing on. Don't be afraid to start slow, start small. Really try and get clear of, hey, what's your goal? Like at the end of, let's say for us, we love students to be discipled for a year. So the end of this school year, like what's our goal? What are we looking for? And many of them will continue the next school year. At least that's what we experienced this go round. But if you just have a year, like what's the goal? And then let that goal inform the direction that you give your people who are going to disciple the college students. And don't be afraid to say, hey, we could have done something better, and grow and change and keep trying to improve one day at a time.
Yeah, that's good. And here's the last question. And I want to kind of piggyback off just what you talked about, because I think one of the challenges that I see as talking to leaders is they maybe inherit or accidentally create a ministry structure around some type of gathering. right?
Yep.
So the midweek or the Sunday morning, Sunday school, or whatever it's going to be, kind of becomes the primary thing.
Yep.
And I think that there's a stirring for a lot of leaders of saying, well, that's not exactly like hitting the mark. It's not. And for somebody who says, man, we need to really begin to shift the focus from, not that you stop gathering or meeting midweek or whatever, but really to begin to prioritize evangelism and ongoing discipleship. Continue to talk about that. What would be some simple next steps for a leader who says, we need to prioritize this area? Like, we need to, like, our ministry needs to shift in this way. What would be some kind of just simple next steps you want to continue to add to them that would help them make that shift?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can empathize with that leader in many ways because I inherited a ministry that had a Sunday gathering, worship and teaching that had been done one way for a long time, and in the past had been really big, and so there were people at the church who remembered that and loved that, and we want people in the gym, we want those seats filled. And I just, not that there's anything wrong with that. I think that's great if it's happening, but if you focus on that piece, you run the risk of missing the call to make disciples and the focus on that evangelism and ongoing discipleship. And so I think there's a couple of suggestions I'd have. One, would encourage you to spend some time with your leadership. Is it the executive pastor, the senior pastor, and really talk through what your goals are for the ministry. Like, is your goal to make disciples, or is your goal to run a program that gets as many people there as you can? Because I think strategies are going to be different. And when you're able to get alignment with your leadership of, hey, we want to make disciples, you might not be able to do everything the exact way you want. You might have to continue to operate within some guidelines of, hey, we still want you to have this midweek gathering, but because you're aligned on, hey, we want to make disciples, maybe you can focus on your small groups or on this one-on-one discipleship and just have that freedom to redirect some of your energy based off that shared vision of where you're going with your leadership. I think that most people are reasonable. No one's going to push back on, hey, we want to make disciples. And so if you can help them understand, focusing in these other areas will actually enhance our ability to make disciples. I think that's key. So part of it is engaging like your leadership. And then part of it is just casting vision for your team. So your student leaders, helping them understand, man, we have got to prioritize making the gospel. Are making disciples. We've got to prioritize sharing the gospel. Here's why. Let's open up scripture. Let's look through this. Let's wrestle through this. And because of what we see here, like, our primary focus is going to shift from that midweek gathering to engaging the lost on campus, to building gospel relationships, to spending time around a coffee table or around a supper table and doing discipleship and teaching these students what it looks like to know and follow Jesus with their lives. And I think as you cast vision for those students, they're going to look to you. Is your life reflecting that? Are you saying, hey, we need to do these things, but then you're going to your office and spending 30 weeks to plan that, midweek gathering? Or are you out engaging the lost and discipling students? Like, they're going to look to you for guidance on how you do this. So model that for them, is champion it when you see it. And I also think there's value in casting vision to some of your adult leaders in the church. Maybe it's deacons, maybe it is small group leaders, Sunday school leaders, whatever group it might be, trying to cast vision of, hey, here's where we're going as a college ministry. Because when you cast vision for them, you're going to be able to invite them into opportunities to disciple college students. And I think that's life-giving to your adults in the congregation. Like, man, I can meet with a 19-year-old who is a new believer, but are just hungry to follow Jesus. Like, that's awesome. That's a great way to start my day. And so to summarize, I think you need to engage your leadership above you at the church and land on a shared vision of, yes, we want to make disciples. And then ask yourself, okay, is the way we're currently spending our time focused on optimizing the goal to make disciples?
Yeah.
or focused on getting people to our seats? Because I think those are two different focuses that are going to result in two different
Yes.
approaches to ministry. And I would argue we should focus on making disciples. Secondly, cast vision for your team. Like, open the word with them, do a training with them, help them understand, here's what we want to do. Here's why we want to do it. Look at me as I show you what it looks like to go out and live this way. And then finally, cast vision for the church. Ask them to pray for you. Invite them into this, to be a part of this, investing in the next generation. I think if you can do those three things, you can still have a midweek. You
Yeah.
can want to be excellent in doing that midweek, but you can focus on making disciples at the same time. And so, yeah, I think that'd be my encouragement to the leaders there.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, man, it's just been so good to dive into these conversations, and just the value that you unpack today, I think, is tremendous. I think one of the things that I love, and I want to encourage anybody who's live watching the replay, man, if you've been stirred by this, man, Patrick is a great resource, and he's been more than willing at any point to jump on calls with people, talk through things. And so, man, if that's something that you're wrestling with, I'd really encourage you. That we have just some amazing people in this community, and some of you need to leverage the people who are in here as well. So, Patrick, thank you so much for just sharing with us today. Thanks for taking some time and share what you're learning, how you're challenged, how you're growing as a ministry. How about last thing, if you were to just encourage, if you wanted to throw one more encouragement in any area, it doesn't have to be just evangelism, discipleship, but for ministry leaders who are listening in, what would you tell them?
Yeah, man, keep pressing on. It's worth it. I was spend some time in Matthew recently talking with my son, and I just had to remind myself, like, we are called to love God with all of our heart, soul, and mind, to love our neighbor as ourselves. Like, cling to that, pursue that. You do that, it's going to be hard at times. Ministry is tough. Ministry is really tough. It can be frustrating, can be challenging. But if you pursue the Lord with all that you've got, if you love your neighbors as yourself, you keep going one day after another, man, the Lord's going to honor your work. And it might not look the way you want it to look. That's fine. It's not about you. It's about the Lord and pursuing Him, making Him known, loving Him, loving your neighbors. It's going to be worth it. And if I can be of assistance to any one of you guys, my cell is 210-275-2204. Shoot me a text. If it's a prayer request, I'd love to pray for you. If you've got any practical questions about how we do things, we'd love to talk through it. If you're ever coming through Aggie Land, let me know. I'll buy you coffee or a lunch. But proud of you guys. Keep pressing on, and y'all have a great Christmas.
Sweet. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate your time today. Look forward to seeing you in person here in a couple of weeks, and have a great Christmas.
Thanks, Andy. Take care, guys.
We'll see you later.
Bye.